So just a little overview of tonight. We'll be together for about an hour or so. What we'll cover. So of course, this is the first in our four-part series about career changes. So my whole goal for this is to really help you all get to a place where you feel confident about making a career change and moving forward with some action items and actual steps to make those changes for yourself. So tonight's presentation called Where Are You Going? Really, this is sort of laying the foundation for stuff. And so my goal is to do a little bit of talking about why are you here today? So of course you're here because you have either definitely decided that you want a career change, or you're on the fence about it, and maybe you're just looking for some direction and inspiration. So I think the first step in deciding on a career change is really doing some thinking about why do you want that change? What are you looking for in a change? So does that mean that you need to completely change directions? Does that mean that you need to pivot just a little bit with your career direction? And what does that mean for you? And then I'll leave you with some strategies and tools to start identifying and deciding on your options. Now, of course, today we're not going to get you to a place where you know exactly what you want to do. Maybe you do, maybe you have some ideas, which is wonderful. But I would like to give you things that you can reflect on after our session, because we do have 2 weeks between the next one. And I hope if this inspires you enough tonight that you will come around for next week's session to talk about the next parts of this. So like I said, we will leave the chat open tonight. And hopefully my goal for this is to be interactive. And even though we are in a webinar setting, which is not the most interactive, my goal is to make it as interactive as possible. So if you all want to, if you're feeling comfortable, you can connect with each other on chat. But if you do have direct questions for me, I just ask that you use that Q&A feature, which is right down there at the bottom of your screen. Something that I always like to start off with when I do any presentation for you all is really thinking about, first, I wanted to let you know what are the resources that you have here through the University of Richmond. So if you are an alumni of any year, if you are an SPCS student, an MBA student, or a graduate of either one of those programs, I am your girl. So you can reach out and we can do a lot of one-on-one chats if you want to. The great news is you have access to Career Services Free for Life. So we can talk about all kinds of things that you see there on your screen. We can talk about making an action plan for yourself, no matter where you are in your journey. We can talk about a job search strategy. We can do resume and cover letter reviews, all kinds of stuff. We can do mock interviews as well, which is really great. Down there at the bottom is a link for Spider Connect, which is the system that we use to schedule appointments. And there's some other stuff, functionalities as well. And so that's how you would schedule a one-on-one appointment with me. Towards the end, I'll have my email address. So if you have any questions throughout the process or just getting started, just let me know. Over here on the right, we do have some resources that are available to you. Like I said, Spider Connect has a lot of things that you can use. Additionally, all of webinars like this and all of the other really wonderful ones, which include fun webinars that Alumni Relations has done, like cooking demonstrations and such. Those are all available in that link at the top right on their YouTube page. So if you've missed anything that's been done in the past, you can feel free to go there and access all of that content anytime you want. And there's some other resources there as well that you can feel free to utilize as you are on this journey. So we'll go ahead and dive in. I tend to be a little bit of a chatty Cathy, so I'm trying to keep myself on time here. So some of the content you feel like we might rush through a little bit, and that's not my intention. My intention tonight really is to give you some good starting places. And hopefully you will have a little bit of time throughout tonight to think about stuff and really do some reflection for yourself. So as I said a few minutes ago, I really wanted to start off with first, why do you want to make a change, right? Because when people get to a point where they have either decided definitely want to make a change, or something's just feeling a little bit off, and this is not doing it for me, but I don't know what the next steps are, right? There's a lot of reasons that can bring you there. And for some people, every single one of these reasons on this list is exactly what brought them to that point. Or sometimes there's just a couple of them. And I think what's important in this situation, and the reason why I wanted to take some time to think about this, is because some of these reasons, sometimes when you're looking at why you want to change, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do a complete 180 from where you are, right? Because that's difficult. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. It's frustrating, right? And sometimes there's some additional education involved in those kind of decisions. And sometimes what that means for you is that you just need to make a little bit of a career adjacent change, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's sort of a change where, it's not completely different from what you're currently doing, but it is a little bit similar. It's using the same skills that you have, just in a different manner. So I did want to talk about a few of these a little bit. So the number one reason why people leave their current roles is because, or they make the decision that they want to leave, is because of poor management or leadership, right? Maybe you have that boss that is just so frustrating to you, or something is going on with leadership where you're just not feeling supported or appreciated or recognized. This is the number one reason people leave jobs. This does not necessarily equate that you need a brand new to completely different overhauled career, but it means that something's not right with you at this organization or in this role, right? Other reasons, people, it's sort of similar to that one, not feeling appreciated or recognized at work. So maybe you do really, really great work, but you're just not getting any of that positive reinforcement. And that can be very frustrating. You're burnt out, which is super broad. You can be burnt out for a lot of different reasons. Maybe your organization doesn't really have the capacity or doesn't really support growth or promotion within that organization. And that that's certainly something that you're looking for in the future. Some people get to a place with their jobs where they're just sort of capped at the salary, right? And maybe you do have life goals for yourself, and your current salary or pay is just not meeting those goals for you, and you're going to have to look for something a little bit different. You're bored, you've outgrown the work. A lot of people nowadays are looking for more flexibility and balance within their work. For those of us who are fortunate enough to continue working these days, and we have been working from home, like myself and a lot of my other colleagues at the university, there are some pluses and minuses to it. And so maybe, and I've talked to a couple clients recently who have said this, is that, they're ready for the next move, but they definitely want or need that move to be very flexible, because maybe in the last year, a little bit less than a year, we've kind of gotten used to this work from home flexibility and things like that. So that could be, I sort of predict that's something people are going to be looking for. Maybe you just realize that your current role or job is just sort of having a poor outlook. Maybe it's not going to be going where you want it to go in the future. So you're feeling like you're seeing the writing on the wall, and you want to do something a little bit different. Or maybe straight up, you just really want a new industry. And if that's where you are, that is totally great. And that's a wonderful place to be, to want a new direction. Just knowing that it, excuse me, knowing that it might, take a little bit longer or have some more steps involved in that, because that's a bit more. So I want to take a couple minutes for you to think about some of these things. So if you can take a couple minutes and, jot down or tick off some of these things that you might identify with or align with right now with where you are. And really think about sort of why you want that change. And so, like I said, we'll give you a minute or two for that. Take stock of it. And if you are feeling generous and like you want to, you can feel free to share in the chat, or you don't have to, because I realize that these are very personal reasons that people have for things that they want to do. So, but I do want to give you a couple minutes to reflect on this. So I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and give you some time to think. Okay, you all may still be thinking, and that's perfectly great. And I hope that you are taking some time for yourself to think about why you are interested in the change. Somebody did alert me, maybe just the panelists can see the chat. If that's the case, I'm very sorry. One of these, I've done plenty of these, and you would think that I would have the stuff figured out by now, but there's always something that trips me up. But one of our participants did chime in and just say that currently stay-at-home parent, but knows that it's time to get back into some sort of work, but just knows that it's also not what they were doing pre-kids. So that's, there's all kinds of reasons, and people are in a lot of different places and why. And that is definitely something that, a lot of this stuff is really individualized to your own situation. So if you, would like to have a one-on-one conversation, I would be more than happy to do that and chat through some of the stuff that you all are going through. Somebody says I was stressed out. Yes, straight up, that's a reason, right? I've certainly been in positions myself where I have felt at capacity and beyond capacity, and felt like, well, there's no other way out of this but to change, right? And that's, sometimes that's the only reason that you need. Somebody else said ready to begin working in a new industry, coming from healthcare management, and ready for a new career. And that's totally fine. Sometimes you're burnt out and you're just, you're either maybe burnt out, or you're feeling like you've hit your ceiling in this industry, and you're just ready for something else. So that's some ethical concerns. Yeah, hospitality industry is taking quite a hit, and sometimes that's where that, poor job outlook comes in handy, or not comes in handy, excuse me, where the poor job outlook plays into things, and maybe you're sort of seeing the future. So thank you all very much for sharing, and I do appreciate that. So I hope that you do take some of these, and also know that this is not an exhaustive list. These were just things that I've either experienced in the past or heard about, or just sort of knew off the top of my head. So if there are other reasons that are in your reasoning, write them down and keep them in a place where you won't lose them and you can access them. It's great to mention too that I think it's after this slide, I'll have a pause for questions. So if you're thinking of anything, go ahead and drop that in the Q&A, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. So, now that you've done some thinking about why you want a change, here are some things that you can do to figure out what this means for you. So in other words, where do you go after this, right? So do you decide to make a complete 180? Do you decide to pursue roles that are a little bit more adjacent or sort of similar, right? It might be like a 30-degree turn, not 180 or 90. Or do you keep within the same general industry and just look for other companies that are going to either give you the flexibility or the support or their appreciation that you're looking for? So a couple things here, we'll just talk about them. So the first thing that I always recommend to people is just making a pros and cons list. And either that could be about your current role or your current industry that you're in, or it could be both, whatever is sort of calling you at that time. Don't overthink these things when you are making your list, but just make it true to where you're at right now and just sort of start with a brainstorm. The reflection that I would really encourage you and ask you to do with this piece is, and any reflection that you do, make sure that you're very honest with yourself. You don't have to necessarily share these with other people. This is really just for you to, because you have so many thoughts jumbling around in your head, and just getting them out on paper, I think, is really important. So really doing some thinking about, if you could do the exact same work at another place or with different management, would you still be excited about the work that you do? Right? Because, personal testament, I have absolutely been at a place before where, a place in my career, but a place before where I was thinking to myself, I was sort of tricking myself into thinking, I need to change careers because this is just not currently working for me. Right? I was I was completely at capacity with literally the time that I had to do the work that I was given. I was stressed out. It was a tough relationship with my supervisor. It was just not productive on a lot of fronts. And I quite literally went into work every day feeling like I was 3 days behind on the stuff that I needed to do. And anything new else that came in, I almost wanted to go, no, I cannot do that work. Right? So, but I took some time to reflect on that and thought, it's actually the core work that I still really enjoy. It's just this particular situation that's not working for me. And so sometimes that's the case, sometimes it's not. But I think that this kind of question is definitely worth the time to reflect on it. The next action that I have over here for you, and this is really important because it sort of plays into your values and where you're at this point, is to really list out, and again, brainstorm list. Don't take anything off your list. Write whatever comes to mind first and just get it down on paper, right? So list your priorities and rank them in order of importance. I think what's key to remember here is that we are all in different seasons of our life. And what I mean by that is sometimes we are starting a family, sometimes we have a young family, sometimes we're not in that place, sometimes we've raised our family already. Whether you're male or female, that doesn't matter. And so sometimes our personal life plays into the season that we're in and what we need from the work that we do. Sometimes we need more flexibility, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we need more salary, sometimes we don't, sometimes we're good with where we're at, right? So list your priorities and rank them in order of importance in the season that you're in right now. So this is just an example of some, and you can, again, add things to the list. I hope you do whatever it is that's important to you at the moment. Things like salary, benefits, work-life balance and flexibility, the opportunity to grow your skills and to be supported by that in your organization, advancement, so moving up in the ranks in terms of positions, good support and appreciation from management, all kinds of other stuff. There's so many other things that can go on your list, but go ahead and make this list, rank it in order of importance, because this will be really important for you when you do move on, whatever that next step is, that you can make sure that when you are applying for jobs, networking and doing the interviews, that you can sort of take an assessment of these things that you're looking at, you can assess whether or not they're meeting your priorities. The reflection that I encourage you to do here is to ask yourself again, honestly, if you do change careers or industries and you more or less start over. So this would be a situation where it's less of a career adjacent role and more of sort of a starker pivot. So if you were to do this, can you realistically do this at this point in your life? You know, I think the realities of these situations are that sometimes, and this completely depends, sometimes you have to take a little bit less money than what you're making now, or maybe you have a little bit less flexibility. So is that something that you can realistically do? And a follow-up to that is, if you are going to completely change careers, what will make it worth it to you? So I hope that you can sort of take stock of some of these things. Like I said, our next slide is a pause for questions. I see that there's a couple in there, so I will check that Q&A in just a moment. But also know that I will be sending these slides out, so you will have them in perpetuity if you want to refer back to any of them. Okay, so we have a couple questions in here. This was from a few, okay. It was just some stuff about some technical things in the chat. I think that we opened up chat to most people, so people should be able to see it. So hopefully that's the case. And there is one that I will get to towards the end. All right, so we'll be moving on. The latter part of our presentation tonight is really thinking about, in the next few slides, we'll be diving into the things on this list. But wherever you have decided now that you want to go, whether that's making a little bit of a change or a complete change, the next question naturally to yourself is, okay, well, I know that this is what I want to do or how I want to move forward. How do you get to where you want to go, right? Because that's the obvious question for yourself. So there's some things that I would recommend, such as, you know, starting off with some reflections and some assessments to get ideas of occupations or roles that you can look out for, brainstorming those and figuring out maybe some directions that you want to explore. And then the next piece of this, you know, once you have a little bit better idea of where it is that you want to go and what particular things you're looking for, making sure that you're doing some research on your options. And there's a few ways that you can really research those things, but that is really important. I think for a fair amount of the people that I talk to, that's one of those steps that either they sort of gloss over a little bit or just don't do. And then they find themselves in positions where they're job searching, or they've made a decision to go back to school for something that sounded really great on paper, but they didn't know a ton about, right? And so I certainly don't want you to be in that position. So making sure that you're making a really informed decision, I think, is important here. The next piece on this would be to really take a deep dive and think about, you take an assessment of your skills. What are the skills that you have now? How can you talk about them in a way that is transferable to other careers or types of roles that would make sense to that manager? And then finally diving in and developing an action plan and a timeline for yourself. Sorry, I've been having to, this weather is making my allergies worse, and so I'm having to drink a lot of water. So the values and self-reflection piece, again, these are just some things that you can take, jot down, refer to them later in the slides that I send out, and really take some time for yourself to think very honestly about these. Because again, they do really play into where you go from here, right? If somebody asked me this, I was actually participating in a professional development seminar for myself that I found was one of the most useful ones that I've ever been to. And the presenter asked us a very simple question, which really got my gears moving. She just asked us, what are your top 3 values? And I thought, well, nobody, yeah, I will clarify that in just a second. Thank you very much, Kristen. A very simple question, but sometimes hard to answer. I do have a link later on in the slides for a little like free online thing that might get your gears thinking about what types of values. And so my follow-up question to that would be, how do you want to use these values, or how do you want to see them play out in your next move? You can also ask yourself, how have they been playing out in the jobs that I've done previously or currently? So a little clarification on that, like what are the things that really drive you in the work that you do? What are things that are really important? What are the things that are really important to you with the work that you do? So for example, I'll share a little bit about myself. So years and years and years ago, because I went to graduate school many moons ago. And before that, I was really in a crossroads professionally, trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I was working in an ICU in a role that I was not terribly happy with. It wasn't really motivating to me. I was managing the front desk of a very busy ICU. I had done some internships in college. I spent the next few years after graduation really doing a bunch of odd jobs that really didn't line up. They didn't make much sense to me at the time. And when I really started thinking about what was important to me, excuse me, in the current role that I was doing in the ICU, and I really thought about what motivated me there, what was motivating me the most was the connections that I was making with either the patients or the family members that I was working with. Because managing the front desk of an ICU, you have a lot of contact with the family members who are in great distress, and you have to be a source of comfort for them. From that particular situation, I knew that being on the front lines of really heavy work like that, dealing with the types of situations that the patients and their families were in was not something that I wanted to do moving forward. But I knew that the value that I took from that was being a guide and a resource and a comfort for people. That had always played out in anything that I had decided to do up until that point. So any job that I did, like even when I did, I used to do sales for sports teams, which was definitely not the best way to use my skills. So I essentially helped coaches for anywhere from like T-ball to university-sized teams get the equipment and stuff that they needed. The thing that I really took from that was pride in making sure that the people had what they needed, right? And that we had a good relationship. So if you take a little bit of an assessment about that, I hope that makes sense to you all. But if you take a little bit of an assessment about that in terms of like what has driven you, what's really important to you, that can help you sort of figure out how has that played out for me in the past and how do I want that to play out for me in the future, right? Other things for me were really important was connectivity with people and developing relationships. I get to see all of that stuff play out in the current work that I do, case in point, right? And so those are things that, your values in terms of this is, it's probably not going to change tremendously throughout your career, but it might look a little bit different, right? You might use your values slightly differently depending on the role that you're in. But generally speaking, they're probably going to be the same. And Sean, to answer your question in the chat, yes, I will send these slides out afterwards so you can have them for reference. The next thing I think that is good to reflect on is I sort of touched on it a little bit, but how and where can you use your values that you have sort of identified in a way that honors the skills that you have, right? So again, with my desire to be connected to and develop relationships that are ongoing with people and to be a guide and a resource for them, at that point, when I was years and years ago, before I went to graduate school, I didn't really have any, I didn't really acquire skills to work in the type of setting that I'm currently in, which is why in my case, I decided that I needed to go get a digital education, which I did. But the acquired skills that I had up to that point was just the simple act of developing relationships with people, right? I demonstrated that in my sales role. I demonstrated that in the role at the hospital, where I got to develop good, close relationships with family members that, even though they were in the ICU and in that setting for a really terrible reason, they didn't leave with a bad impression of our unit or of our staff, right? Even though it was a terrible place for them to be, they still thought these people really care about us. So thinking to yourself about how can you use your values in a way that honors the skills that you already have. And then the last one here, what have been the biggest drivers and things that have you excited throughout what you've done so far? So thinking back through the roles that you've had, even if they're sort of broad stroked ideas, what has excited you about that work? What has kept you coming back, even though you might have been a little bit frustrated or stressed out or things like that. So doing some reflecting on that stuff is really good. And the next slide that we have are talking about some actual assessments that I would recommend for you as well to help you put a little bit more context. Excuse me. So assessments come in all shapes and sizes, and they all do, there's the groupings that I have up here, they all sort of do some different things for you. And sometimes you need these more than you might need other kinds of assessments. And that's totally fine. So a values assessment, I posed the question last slide to think about what are the top 3 values for you. A lot of times that's easier said than done, because you might be sitting there thinking, I don't know. I have no idea what my values are. I've never been asked this question. I've never really thought about it. Maybe that's not really how your brain naturally works. So the link there is for, just a little quick online values exercise that you can do to get your gears flowing and thinking about what's important to you. Typically, values are either intrinsic or extrinsic. And so intrinsic would be more internalized, so related to the work itself, or extrinsic, related to outside factors like you value the physical setting that you're in, or you value other things outside of the actual responsibilities and skills of that job. So back to the hospital, where I was working at the hospital, I definitely knew, I entered that role because I thought, I think I want to be a nurse. So let me put my toe in the water and test this out. Turns out that I did not like 12-hour shifts, and being on my feet all day was not conducive for me, right? And so I figured out that the physical setting was not a value that I had, and not one that I was willing to overcome. The next kind of assessments here that you can look at are interests. So things that surveys that take assessment of things that you enjoy doing. The one that we usually recommend the most is the strong interest inventory. And actually you all do um, as graduates, and I believe SPCS students too. You do have access to take the strong interest inventory through the Career Services Office. So if you're interested in that, just shoot me an email and let me know. And we'll get you hooked up with that. If you wanted to test the waters out with that, that link is for a sort of a free, it's a shorter version that you can do on your own in just a little bit and try to get some directions with that. Personality assessments. So things that look at traits, motivators, you know, what your sort of attitudes are in general. My favorite one is the Strengths Finder. Some people might have heard about it. If you hadn't, definitely check it out. That link that's there is for the book on Amazon, and that will the book will give you a code that you can then go online to take the assessment. I absolutely love the Strengths Finder. I think it is so spot on and intuitive. And honestly, the first time that I took the Strengths Finder, I thought to myself, they must have just interviewed me and wrote these descriptions about myself. Essentially what it does is it has 34 strengths or themes, as it calls them. And the cheaper version gives you your top 5 ranked in order of how much they align with you. So for example, my top is communication, surprise, surprise. And what that means for me is that I'm a natural storyteller. That's sort of where I gravitate to. I love telling stories. I love telling other people's stories, hearing other people's stories, all that kind of stuff. So it's really interesting. The next thing there is aptitude, and just sort of thinking about, you know, what kind of skills do you either come by naturally, or have you developed over the years? And just remember also, my little disclaimer about assessments, that there's not a single assessment that will give you a magic answer. I know it's really tempting to look at assessments and go, I just want this to tell me exactly what I need to do. And that would be really nice, wouldn't it? But it will give you some context and direction. And that's where, when you take an assessment or multiple assessments, do some reflection. Let's connect, you and I, and we can talk through some of those things and what they might mean for you. So using your own reflections in combination with assessments is good. And then also taking into account your priorities that you have thought about from your previous slides. I do see you have in the chat here. So the links, yeah, so the presentation I'm doing live tonight, the links will not work, but they will work when I send the slides out later. So the next step here that I would recommend is to, you know, once you do some reflection for yourself, and I would recommend doing some brainstorming and researching your options. And this is where, you know, a lot of people have a hard time, and I don't think anybody expects you to do this in a vacuum and do it on your own completely. So again, you know, reach out to trusted friends, reach out to me as a career advisor, and have some conversations about, I've done this stuff, this is what I've come up with. I don't really know what all of this stuff means, right? So let's chat. You know, a conversation with me, I might not be able to give you, you know, to say, well, you need to go into this industry, or you need to look at this particular role, right? But we can talk about themes and where that might lead you. So in this step, making a list of what your options are. Again, don't leave anything off the table. This does not have to be a perfect list. And it's always easier to make a really big list and then narrow them down. And so, you know, you can try comparing similar options, career options, or options for different types of roles, and then ranking them for yourself. Also important here is to look for overlap. And so looking for things that are the intersection of what you're good at, what companies need, and what you like to do. I definitely recommend, you know, once you have your list of big options, narrowing it down to 2 to 5 to keep it more manageable. Because if you do go into a job search with thinking there are 10 things that I would like to do, that's going to make your search and applications difficult. It's like going to a restaurant with a 5-page menu, where do you even start to choose what you want to eat, right? Or if you're ordering it online these days. So, narrow your list of options down and keep it manageable for yourself. These could be, what are the most feasible right now for the season that you're in, and what meet your priorities, and what are most interesting to you. The next step here would be to really start doing some research on some of these things. So say you've got some options, things that you're thinking about, curious about, but maybe you don't know a ton about yet. Doing some networking and informational interviews on this. And I know that most people, when they see informational interviews and networking, they do a little bit of a cringe and think, oh God, I don't want to do that. Nope, that's totally unexciting. And it means I have to reach out to new people. It really is one of the best ways to figure out, say that you want to go into human resources, but you have no idea what it's like or what your options even are in human resources. Talk to people that do that stuff. They can give you the best idea of what that's actually like, right? So if you do decide to do this, which I hope you do, some informational interviewing, let's you and I chat, and I've got some hints for you, helpful strategies, how you can reach out to people, and make it a little bit less awkward for yourself. And by the way, I know that we are all virtual, but I have worked with plenty of clients over the last few months who have done a lot of really great networking virtually, and it is definitely possible. And the other way that you can do a little bit of research too on the options that you're thinking about is just by reading some job descriptions. And so say you're interested in human resources, go on LinkedIn or Indeed, or some other sort of larger job site, and just look through some job descriptions and see what's popping up for you. Read through them. Do they seem interesting to you? Do they align with what you think you're looking for? This would be part of the exploration piece that you can sort of get a better sense of your direction. So the last step here that I would recommend is to work on an action plan for yourself. So when you're thinking about your action plan, how are you going to tackle this change? First of all, think about what your short and long-term goals are. And you might be sitting in this webinar tonight thinking, Becca, this is a little bit extra for me. I just want a career change. Setting your long and short-term goals are really, really important, though. It is so much easier to set a goal and work backwards from that than think about what do you do now without a clear direction. So think in chunks for yourself. What do you want the next 6 months to a year to look like? What do you want to have accomplished? So when it's a year from now, what do you want to look back and think to yourself, I'm happy about that. I'm glad with what I've done, because 2022 will come. It will be here. And so you have an option now to decide, what do you want to do with that time? And then what do you want the next 3 to 5 years to look like? Or maybe you don't know, and that's perfectly fine. The 3 to 5 year plan is usually, if you decide when you're changing careers that you need additional education or whatnot, a lot of times the additional education is included in that longer term goal. Thinking about then the action items. So now you have your goals in mind. What is it that you want to do? Brainstorm a list of, jot down what specific things do you need to do to reach those goals or that one goal, right? Pull things from some of the slides that we've just looked at, or some other ideas that you have, but the more specific here that you can be, the better, because if I were to make a list for myself, and the action item on there would be to network. That is extremely nebulous. And so be a little bit more specific with that. Maybe your goal is to reach out to 2 to 3 new people a month. Maybe your goal with networking is to figure out how you want to approach that, right? To feel better about it. So whatever those action items are that you're thinking about, try to be a little bit more specific. Organizing yourself, I will say that the number 3 and number 4 on this list, if I had to pick something that I see the most often, that is most often overlooked by people that I work with, it's these things. They decide they want to make change. They know it's what they want to do. But then they just think, well, we're just going to dive in head first and see how this goes. Usually what happens is a few months later, I hear from them and they're like, well, I've just been applying for stuff and I just don't know. I haven't heard anything back. And usually it's a case of they haven't actually made time for it. So making things a priority for yourself, literally scheduling time to work on this stuff, to work towards your action items, checking in with yourself on your goal progress, every few weeks or so, and literally figuring out how to organize this information. All of the reflections that you've done, maybe you've done a couple assessments, you've done your brainstorm list of occupations and directions that you want to go. Maybe you've done a little bit of networking. Where are you housing that information for yourself, right? What makes sense for you? Do you need a notebook? Do you need an Excel spreadsheet or a Word document or whatever that is, but somewhere to house it so it doesn't live up here or in your email inbox, because that gets really jumbled, right? So I do recommend that you make some time to think about that stuff. And this is my last slide tonight. I'm just going to sort of leave this up here for a minute so it can soak in. We don't need to talk through everything. I do want to leave time for questions at the end. I see we do have a few in the question box, so thank you for that. But these are, I don't know, personal lessons learned or things that I've picked up from other people. But really, this is just about, you decided that you want to make a career change, and that's wonderful. But I think, again, some people, they tend to dive in really head first, and then that's very frustrating for them. So there are, just some things to think about when you are going through this. And maybe this is a good reminder list for yourself to check back in about when you are feeling a little frustrated or you're having a week that you're like, things are just not going well for me. Reminding yourself of these things that are true. This is going to take a little bit of a time. It's not going to be that you're going to make a decision, apply for jobs, and you might get lucky, right? You might get the one that you want, or you might have some sort of side steps along the way. Remember to take small steps, even if they're not perfect. I don't think anybody's expecting anybody here to be perfect, especially if we've learned anything this last year. That's not what we need to be doing. We just need to do what we need to do, right? And so taking a brave leap of faith here and just trusting the process and knowing that eventually it will work out. The one that I really love here is exploring without expectation. I think a lot of people, when you decide to make a change, it's a big deal, right? It's a really big deal to even say it to yourself, let alone other people in your life. I want to change careers. I need to change directions. Exploring without expectation. And what I mean by that is, the expectation that this is going to be something that you built it up in your head. Just exploring the options and seeing what's out there. Maybe you explore one or two of your options and you think, that's not what I want. That's perfectly okay. You've taken the time to explore it. You've decided that's not for you, and then you move on. The last thing we'll talk about here is these last two on the left-hand side. Embracing your story and crafting your new narrative. By the way, the last webinar in this series is talking about crafting your narrative, telling your story. I hear a lot of people that apologize for or are more apologetic in nature towards their career change. This is something that you have decided to do for whatever reason. And you need to be your own biggest fan in this situation. You know what your skills are. Sometimes you need to be reminded of them, and that's fine. But when you are out there talking to people for networking or informational interviewing, or you are on those job interviews, presenting your story in a way that you're very proud of it, and that you know that this is a confident direction that you're going in, you know that you have the skills for this, that's going to resonate with the hiring manager much more than you sort of being a little bit apologetic about it. Well, I just wanted to change, and yeah, that's what sort of brought me here today. So no apologies for it. Be your own number one fan. So I will wrap up on that note. I do see that we have some Q&A from our box, so thank you for that. If you have any others that come in, please feel free to pop them in there, but let me look. Let's see. First question that I see here, how valuable do you find LinkedIn? Would you recommend LinkedIn Premium as a good investment? Okay, two different questions. I find LinkedIn very valuable. Has a lot of functionalities. Premium, I think that the answer to that question depends on what it is you want to get out of LinkedIn. Before I came here full time to the University of Richmond, I was in an active job search for 10 months. I found Premium mildly helpful at best. And again, that depends on what you want to get out of it, right? Premium, the main features of Premium that it allows you is it gives you can better see who's viewing your profile. If that's really important to you, then Premium might be a good option for you. And it also allows you, like for networking purposes, it also allows you the ability to send InMail to people. So InMail is basically like their in-house. So if you're not directly connected on a first degree connection with somebody, that means that you can still message them without connecting to them, if that makes sense. So InMail is sometimes helpful. If maybe you just want to do some exploration, but you don't really want to have that person listed as a connection forever and ever. The other thing actually with Premium that we've added is LinkedIn Learning. So Premium members do get LinkedIn Learning, which has a plethora of really actually interesting and sort of helpful videos about learning on a variety of different topics. So if that's really worth it to you, you can try it out. And I think honestly with Premium, they give you like a free 30 days so you can test it out and see, and you can cancel it. It's a monthly subscription, so you can cancel it at any time without penalty, which is great. But in general, I find LinkedIn very valuable. And I would love to talk to you more about all the functionalities of it. I think it's great. Thank you. That's a great question. Let's see, we've got one here. Two big changes. Interested in moving to Europe. Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much for telling me where you're at, sir. I think that is wonderful, and it sounds like you have a lot going on in your life, and I would love to chat with you more about that to go over some things with your action plan, because there's a lot of factors in that decision, but maybe very exciting. Let's see. Okay. So we have a question about working with headhunters, which is a question that I get quite a bit. And that might be an option. I mean, that's not, I think rarely should you take an option off the table. I know lots of people that have worked with headhunters or, third-party recruiting companies that have been quite successful and very happy. with that. I think the key to working with a headhunter is to find an organization or a company that does that. That's, I don't know the word for it, but really legit. I know that seems very silly, but with an organization that can really work with you one-on-one to help you find stuff that's really meaningful and important to you. Sometimes therein lies the difference between them and maybe staffing agencies, where the goal is just to get you into a job because maybe you just really need one at that point, right? So I think, yeah, I mean, recommended. I think if that's a place that you're at and it's something that you're really considering, it's definitely worth researching some headhunting or third-party recruiting companies to see what they're like, what their reviews are, things like that, because it could be a really good option, especially for the job search, and especially if you're maybe in higher level or more senior positions. They have really great connections with organizations that are looking for those types of roles that you might not have been connected to otherwise. So I hope that's helpful. Let's see. Yay, StrengthsFinder. Somebody else took it. That's awesome. Your experience, do you find that assessments related to core skills and strengths change for folks over time? Yeah, that's a great question. Core strengths, usually they don't change a bunch over time. For example, a long time ago, I took the strong interest inventory, and then a few years ago, I took it again. My core recommendations for that didn't really change over time. Some people do. I mean, if you've been through major life changes, or you've maybe had a really bad experience with something, sometimes those core values might change. But I do think that occasionally, maybe every few years, 5-10 years, it's worth reassessing that just to see, are you in that same place or are you not? So, I mean, I'm also a fan of, we never really stop growing. So that's sort of where I'm coming from with that. Yes, email. Thank you. Here we go. Great question. Thank you, Tracy. So I will go ahead and I know we have a couple more coming in. Let's see. I'm looking forward to the next sessions too, so thank you. Let's see. Would I recommend going through all 4 class sessions? Well, I would love to see you all at all 4. If you want to reach out to me before the next session in 2 weeks, you can certainly do that. Like if you've got specific questions just about like, is this what I'm looking for? Is this going to be useful to me? The way that I plan them, it sort of makes progressive sense. So I would love to have you at all 4. But again, like you don't have to be. If you can pick and choose the ones that you want. That's a great thing about them being virtual and on demand and live, is that you can pick whatever sort of speaks to you. Also know that these are being recorded, so they will live forever and ever on our YouTube page. So you can always access them afterwards as well. Receive separate emails. That is a great question. I will let you know. I'm not sure. But if you are looking for information and registration about the other sessions, just go to alumni.richmond.edu. Down towards the bottom of the page is their calendar, and you can find the links for all of those. So I will go ahead and wrap up in the interest of time. But please, as I said, my email is there. Feel free to reach out to me if you need anything. And you can call me directly if you need to. And careerservices.richmond.edu, we have some resources there for you. And as I said, check out alumni.richmond.edu, certainly, for all of their events. because they're not only doing events for professional development, but they're also doing events for lots of other fun things that sort of maybe distract you from what's going on. In terms of dates for the other sessions, thanks, Tracy. I don't know the actual dates. Oh, wait, I can tell you. Let's see, we've got January 26th is the next one, February 9th, and then February 23rd are the other ones. They're all at 6:30 on a Tuesday night. So I will wrap up tonight. Thank you all so much for joining me. I really, truly hope you got some great things out of the session tonight. Took away some helpful nuggets, things for you to reflect on. And I will definitely look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you.